So first of all, I just wanted to say good afternoon. My name is Elise Finney, and I'm the Director of Business Growth for Argent Bridge Advisors. And today you are joining us for some coffee and conversation. And today's conversation includes Diane Nolan, the Managing Partner of Argent Bridge Advisors, and Sue Summers, who is the Assistant Vice President of NFP Property and Casual Private Insurance Group. Sue and Diane will be discussing some thoughts and guidance on excess liability, which is also known as umbrella policies. And we've prepared some questions for Sue, and we invite you, our audience, to ask your own questions in the Q&A. So you should see the double bubble icon, and you can put your questions in at any time. And with that, I'm going to sign off and hand it over to Diane.
Thanks, Elise. Hope I can man this the way you do. And Sue, thank you. Thanks for joining us. Sue's been a great resource to our clients, so I really appreciate it. And Sue, I wanted to sort of give you a little context as to why we invited you. We've had a number of clients during COVID that have been working on repairs, putting pools in their backyard, buying second properties. And so we've been having a lot of conversation lately about risk management and asset protection, which got me thinking of you. So I appreciate you doing our coffee and conversation. I thought maybe I could ask you a few questions if you don't mind, and please feel free to elaborate as much as you like. And again, as Elise said, we'll welcome questions from our clients. I would just mention that I do have a few prepared. Some of it comes from clients directly. So I'll keep an eye on Q&A, but I may wait till the end, especially if it's something I know we're going to cover. That's okay.
Sure. Thank you.
So let's start with the basics, Sue. What is an umbrella policy? I know there's a lot of terms, maybe blanket, or as Elise said, a liability coverage. Do you want to sort of give us the 101 on umbrella policies first?
Sure. The personal umbrella is a liability policy that goes above and beyond your auto, homeowners, renters insurance. It gives a much higher limit than you can obtain on those other policies. And the purpose is to protect your assets from an unforeseen event like a tragic accident, where you're held responsible for either property damage or bodily injury.
Thank you. So who should consider it? When is it considered? Is there, and this is maybe multiple questions, but ultimately, I suspect you're going to say most people should be adding the umbrella, but are there certain life events or times where you think that makes more sense?
Well, generally, what we see is the first time this conversation comes up is when someone buys their first home. This is their first large asset for most people. However, there are exceptions to the rule. We have a lot of young people in our clientele that are inheriting wealth from parents. And while they may still be living at home, they do have, liquid assets. So it's all about asset protection. So typically when someone buys their first home is when we have the conversation, but it could happen before then for those that are inheriting wealth.
And what about the idea of the umbrella? As you said, it's a supplemental to homeowners and the car insurance, or is it replacing some part of the risk mitigation within those policies? How does it technically work?
The umbrella sits over the top of the auto and the homeowners.
Okay.
You cannot have an umbrella without having those underlying policies. Otherwise,
Okay.
there's a gap. So I like to think of it as the frosting on the cake. The cake is the auto, the renters, the boat insurance, the home insurance, and the frosting is the umbrella that goes over the top of the cake.
And so because it's supplemental too, that's what makes it pretty reasonable, huh? That it's not the first line of defense.
Right. It's not the first line of defense. It's actually usually the last line of defense.
What about, and we have this for many clients, and as you know, for ourselves too, homes in more than one state. Is there does that have to be two different policies? Does all of the coverage for all homes, all autos, what have you, need to be collectively in one place before an umbrella can be useful, or before an umbrella will be written? How does that work?
In general, the umbrella should list all of the homes, all of the autos, all of the boats, all of the recreational vehicles, regardless of what state they're in. That
Okay.
policy should wrap around everything. There may be an exception if, let's say, the client's agent isn't licensed in all of those states. That
Mm-hmm.
might present a problem for the insured in having to get multiple policies. But 90% of the time, it's one policy listing all of the different assets.
How about what's not covered? Is there anything, we don't want anyone to be surprised. Is there ever something that, or an experience that you've had with a client where something is not covered, or they're surprised to learn that the umbrella didn't cover something?
I wish there were a policy that covered everything, but there is no such thing.
Fair enough.
Every insurance contract has exclusions, including the umbrella. I will say that unlike auto insurance, umbrella is not a standard contract. So you really have to read the exclusions on your umbrella policy. Having said that, there are some common exclusions that you will find on almost every umbrella policy. Again, there could be some exceptions, but in general, an umbrella will not cover intentional or criminal acts. An umbrella will not cover aviation exposures. So if I'm a private pilot and I'm flying my neighbor in my private plane and I crash into a tree, my umbrella is not going to respond to that. Aviation is typically going to be excluded from every umbrella policy. Another common exclusion would be business exposures or professional liability. My advice as an insurance agent, if someone were to sue me and say, my advice was faulty or in error, my personal umbrella is not going to respond to that. So business exposure is an area that has to be treated with some other product.
That makes
Another
sense.
exclusion would be, common exclusion would be contractual liability. If I'm entering into contracts of a business nature, or they could even be of a personal nature, they may or may not be addressed by the umbrella. Farming can be excluded. Another common one is sexual molestation. If a client is accused of sexual molestation, 99 times out of 100, whether it's a truthful allegation or a false allegation, it's not going to be covered. Now, here's an area that I think is important to really look into your umbrella. Is your umbrella covering what we call personal injury coverages? I like to call them character assassination coverages: libel, slander, defamation of character, invasion of privacy. Um, those may or may not be covered by your umbrella. Every umbrella carrier takes a different stance on that. Some carriers require you to buy those coverages and pay an additional premium. Some throw them in automatically. Some don't cover them at all and won't let you buy them back. Why I think that's particularly important today is because of how much time we spend on social media, where people post things and somebody may take offense to that and could sue them for, posting my picture on Facebook without my permission. That could be an invasion of privacy lawsuit. And so we're in a virtual world now, and it's really critical to drill down on your umbrella and find out if those character assassination, coverages are there.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, so workers' compensation is not covered. If your domestic employee is injured and they're looking for coverage for medical bills, that may or may not be covered by the umbrella. And again, you have to list all of the locations, all of your cars, all of your watercraft. If they're not listed, they're probably not covered. So it's important to review that each year, but those are some of the general exclusions.
What, Sue, what about like a legal obligation? Is there ever a time where someone is told, you know, I'm making it up, you're a partner in this law firm and you now need to get your, it sounds like this is all for personal. You just said not going to cover business.
Mhm.
Is there ever a situation where there's, should anybody in any field be looking to ensure that they have it because it's expected,
Well,
legal or otherwise?
legally speaking, no, I've never seen
Okay.
anyone required to carry an umbrella. Is it a good practice? Yes. Um,
Yeah.
we live
Agreed.
in a litigious society. It just makes sense
Yeah.
to protect your assets.
So in a case of say, right now, we are all doing business from largely from home. And some people, regardless of the pandemic, have a home-based business. Are there any exceptions to something like that? When you say, you know, your E&O or other error and emissions, that's not a part of it. But is there anything different about working from home right now as it relates to our umbrella, or just no?
No, what
Okay.
you, anything I do really in relation to my work or my income, whatever it is I do to generate an income, is generally not covered by the umbrella. Exceptions to that might be my child who does babysitting for extra money, or, my son who mows the neighbor's lawn for a couple of bucks. Those kinds of income generating activities might be covered depending on how much is being earned. You'll probably find a dollar cap in the umbrella that says you can earn up to X number of dollars and it's not considered a business.
Gotcha. I guess another way of asking it is like, who's vulnerable to lawsuits, or who do you see? What clients, or maybe you could even give us a real life example without scaring everybody,
Yeah.
of where does this umbrella come into play? Or again, as I started with, I know people have had a lot of work done around their homes, and even some things like bought a second property, or I remember a swimming pool in the backyard being an example of a indicator or a
Well,
flag.
we'll start out with, I'll call it your public profile.
Okay.
These days with technology, anybody can find out anything about you on the internet. They can find out who you are, kind of what you do. You have a LinkedIn profile, so now they know your occupation. They can surmise what your income level might be. Then you have people who are in the public eye, athletes, politicians, CEOs. They might have more public visibility just because they're so active in the community.
Right.
But just because you're not a CEO or in the public eye or on TV doesn't mean you're not vulnerable. As I said, anybody can find out things about your assets by searching the internet. Any lawyer you know, um, worth their money is going to be able to find out who you are and what your assets are. So we can't really rely on the public persona as just the only indicator. If you think of oneself as I'm just an average person with an average job, then there are some other risk factors that come into play that might make you at a greater risk for exposing your assets. Those things might be things like, do you own a swimming pool? Do you have a pond on your
Right.
property? Do
Ah,
you have a trampoline for the kids to play on? Do you have animals? Do you host a lot of parties? Do you serve on nonprofit boards? Are you involved in extreme sports where you might be more inclined to injure someone else? So the other thing I think about is, do you have youthfuls living in the house, young drivers under the age of 25 who are inexperienced? Um, do you have domestic staff in the home who maybe makes decisions for you while you're at work? That's another risk factor. And of course, your future income. Um, we all have an income, and if you don't have an umbrella and you're sued and your insurance isn't enough to pay for the judgment, they're going to be looking to maybe garnish wages, and therefore your future income could be at risk because you didn't have enough insurance to pay for the loss. So your future income is an asset, even though it's not in your pocket today. It's an asset that they can consider tapping if you have insufficient funds to pay the claim. And again, along with the youthfuls in the house, it's not just their driving, it's their use of social media. They expose you by what they do on the internet. And the younger generation is so much more technologically active, maybe,
Right.
than my generation, that you're opening up a whole new area of exposure because not everyone can know what their kids are doing 24/7 on the internet. I mean, you can exercise some controls over that, but it is an exposure. So I would say young people, social networking, domestic staff, your public profile, pools, ponds, trampolines, animals, hosting parties, serving on nonprofit boards, and high risk activities like extreme sports.
Super helpful. We have so many questions coming in, Sue. I'm going to start with a couple that are great that we haven't covered. The first is pretty general and a good one. Is an umbrella policy good on a household, or is it a per person thing?
Okay. In general, it's per household. We recommend you name the husband and wife, or domestic partners on the umbrella. And then by definition, your blood relatives living in the household, the children, would be covered.
Great. This is an interesting one. It says, for the first time ever, I saw on my homeowner's insurance a list of dogs that were not covered under my policy. I do have an umbrella and wondering if in general, if something is excluded from my homeowners, will the umbrella pick it up, or should I look at a different homeowner's policy? The dog is a rescue and not sure of the breed.
Great question. To all the animal lovers out there, great work taken in those rescues. I have one myself, and we don't know exactly what she is. I would get rid of any homeowner's policy that has a dog breed exclusion. It's too risky. One dog bite and you're exposed. The second part of your question, would that umbrella cover you if the homeowners doesn't? Probably not. The umbrella typically follows the underlying policy. So in general, if it's not covered on the underlying, it's not covered on the umbrella. There may be an exception to that. I have not seen one, but I would strongly consider replacing the homeowner's policy to get rid of those dog exclusions.
And another great question, is there a general formula for how much you should have, how much protection you should have? Can you ever be overinsured? That's a good question.
Okay, the answer is there's no right answer to that. The things you want to consider are, what is your net worth? All those other factors. Do I have a pool, pond, young people? Am I on social media? Do I have a dog? Do I have a horse? You want to think about cost. What does the umbrella cost? Can I afford that? You know, if I can afford a $5 million umbrella, would I rather not pay that premium every year and have the peace of mind rather than worrying that I might have to pay $5 million out of my portfolio to satisfy a judgment? So there's no right answer, but we should think about net worth, future earnings, all those high risk exposures, serving on boards, et cetera, and what can I afford to pay for a premium?
Excellent. And you're leading right into the next question, Sue, which is serving on a nonprofit, question mark. What would be the reason I would open myself up to liability?
All right, that's a great question. It's very common. Think of it this way. Anytime I do volunteer work, um, I can be sued. But serving on a nonprofit board, what we recommend to our clients is twofold. One, make sure that any board you're serving on has nonprofit directors and officers liability insurance, and make sure that you are covered by that policy. I suggest to our clients that they get a certificate of insurance from any board they're serving on, so they know that there is a policy in force and that they would be covered by that policy. What happens sometimes is if there's a large lawsuit or a large judgment, and let's say that nonprofit has only purchased $1 million coverage, and that's not enough to pay for the claim. What if they decide to name each of the board members individually in addition to the organization? There may not be enough coverage under that organization's policy to satisfy the judgment. So then the question becomes, should I buy my own coverage to supplement what the organization has purchased? You know, if the organization's bought 5 or 10 million, I'm pretty comfortable. Maybe I'm not worried. But if the organization has only bought 1 million, maybe I want to buy 1 million of my own in case the board members are named individually in addition to the organization being sued. So that's an area you want to think about. Get a certificate of insurance from each board that you serve on. Look at the limit and decide, do I think that's reasonable? Do I think there would be a judgment that would go above and beyond that? Should I get a quote from my agent for supplementary coverage for my own $1 million? So that's something you want to think about.
Thanks, Sue. I'm going to wrap a few of these together because they relate similarly to the challenges that the risks that we're trying to mitigate, to the advice that we give. But essentially, in more than one way, people are asking, what's the relationship between net worth and the umbrella? We try to make sure that the umbrella is equal to net worth.
Mhm.
And someone's asking, is it dollar for dollar, or for how many millions of net worth do I have in an umbrella? So it's asked a number of different ways here, but everyone's curious, I guess, if we're giving the right advice.
Okay. So when you think of your net worth, you're thinking about your assets. Think of if you have a bucket and you put all your assets in that bucket, what is that number? Okay. That is
We can tell.
probably a good starting point with what's exposed here. What is at risk here? The assets are at risk. So if you think of, you know, Diane, growing your assets like you're blowing up air in a balloon, and then one lawsuit comes along and pops the balloon, all that hard work she's done is out the window because all those assets are now gone. They're tied up in court. So again, no right answer, but that's a good starting point. And in addition to thinking about the net worth, again, I go back to, you know, get a quote. What is the premium? If you can afford to buy a 5 million umbrella, and your assets are 4.2 million, but you can afford a 5 million umbrella, opt to go higher. just because you also want to think about your potential for future earning,
income,
future
yeah.
income.
I hadn't thought of that actually.
Mhm.
And then one other question about homeowners and auto policies where there is liability stated. And the question is, explain the interrelationship between these policies when there's liability on a homeowner's liability on your auto versus the umbrella liability.
Okay, so in a claim scenario, you're either going to the auto policy to start or you're going to the homeowner's policy to start. You're never going to both. Okay, so is it an auto accident? We start with the auto policy. It's insufficient to pay the claim. We go to the umbrella as the second line of defense. If it's a homeowner's liability, such as somebody drowned in your swimming pool, or someone came over to a party at your house, they drank too much alcohol, they left, and they stumbled in a hole in your front yard, that's a homeowner's liability. So we would start with the homeowners in that scenario and go to the umbrella as the second line of defense. So either the auto or the home or the boat is the first line of defense. We exhaust that policy first, and the umbrella comes second. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Another question. In shopping for a policy, are there any pitfalls to be aware of? And are online insurers more or less expensive in general?
That's a good question. Online insurance is a convenience. Sometimes I think of it as you can cut out the middleman, so to speak, by not having an agent and going direct. And if you know what you're doing, you may save some money by doing it that way, by cutting out an agent because you're not paying them commission. So it is possible that online insurance is a more economical product. However, you don't have a person to review with you and make sure there's no gaps in coverage. You don't get professional advice. You get a different person every time you call in. It may not be coordinated well if you have, a policy with company A here and a policy with company B there. So there could be some coordination issues. You may not have professional advice. I look at it this way too. I could go online and buy a program to write my own will. I could do that. However, I choose to go to an attorney to draft my will and tell me the things I should be thinking about in drafting that will. So could I save money and do a will online for $250? Yes, but I would rather go to an attorney because he's going to tell me things I should be thinking about. So I kind of liken it to that.
Yeah, agree. You don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. It says that is excellent information about the nonprofit and something I would never have considered. Thank you, Sue.
You're welcome.
Sue, would you mind sharing? I think it's a great, I've learned a lot over the years from you sadly, based on somebody's tragedy, based on an experience that maybe we should be aware of or would surprise us to know, or just maybe share a live example of where the umbrella came into play, or someone didn't have it and should have had it, something like that, that really drives it home, if you would.
I'll give you a recent example, just of a case that I'm aware of, and then I'll give you an example that I was personally involved in. A recent example is settlement to a person that dove into the shallow end of a friend's pool at a party. And became, had a spinal cord injury and really will be wheelchair bound for the rest of her life. That case settled for 10 million. So unfortunate accident. that's where your umbrella will really, would come in handy for something like that. A claim more dear to my heart, my first week on the job as an insurance agent a number of years ago, was a client who called me and said, my son skipped school today and he decided to bring a friend home with him because they knew we were both working and we wouldn't be home. And they came home and they were just going to watch TV and have soda and be delinquents for the day. And the client had a Civil War gun collection, locked, albeit, and his son decided that it would be a fun thing to show his friend Dad's Civil War collection, and he knew the gun collection, and he knew where the key was. So he opened the gun locker and was showing his friend all these Civil War guns, and as you probably imagine, one of the guns discharged, and the friend was killed instantly. And that was my first week on the job, my first claim, and I thought, I really don't want to do this job. And that client did not have an umbrella. They had 300,000 liability on their homeowner's policy. The insurance company wrote that check for 300,000 to the family of the deceased boy so fast your head would spin. They washed their hands of it. We've met our obligation. If you want more money, you're going to have to sue our client in court and get more money. So that was a tragedy that happened. Something, the son was innocently showing him this gun collection. He shouldn't have skipped school, shouldn't have been home, but kids are kids. So, the insurance company wrote the check for the policy limit and washed their hands of it. And that clearly was an example of someone who, if they had had an umbrella, would not have ended up in court fighting the deceased's family for more money.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, I hate to hear it, but I appreciate you sharing this. Those are, that is just tragic.
And there's that higher risk of having children. Increased exposure, young people, inexperience, it just happens. But, we can't stop our children from making mistakes, but we can insulate our assets from the ramifications in most cases.
Right.
Mhm.
One last general question. Should I ever let a friend drive my car?
Oh my goodness. Well, I just had this conversation with a client yesterday. He's so angry because he loaned his car to his neighbor. His neighbor caused an accident and the insurance company paid $68,000 to the injured party. And my client's rates went up and he wants to know why, because after all, he wasn't the driver. And I said, but you made a decision to loan your car to your neighbor, and therefore the company paid a claim and they have the right to surcharge your policy. So is it a good thing to help your neighbor? Yes. Just be aware of how that might affect you should that neighbor or whomever you loan it to be involved in an accident. If your company pays a claim, your rates are probably going up. So there's some risk that comes with doing that.
Sue, thank you. I don't know if you have any final thoughts, but I want to say that the stories and the information it's exactly what I hope to hear. And I hope that our clients and those that are listening got what they hope to hear from you today. That was super valuable as always. You're a great resource to us. I greatly appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, if there are other questions, you can reach out to me. Elise will provide contact information. I also encourage you to have dialogue with your current agent about these matters. If there's something I said that, prompted you to think about your own coverage, have a conversation with your agent and say, am I properly protected? Do I need to do something different?
Sue, that's outstanding, and I appreciate it. You, again, any questions for Sue, Elise will share contact information, and I appreciate your guidance to also check in with their agents. We've had the conversation. It's great to get the clarity from you, as well as the cautionary tales. I think we all need to be informed and aware, and I greatly appreciate it. I appreciate everybody listening in. We have a huge crowd today, and I love to see that. And so it's on everyone's mind, Sue, that's for sure. So I appreciate that, and appreciate Elise for hosting, and for everybody dialing in. I do see one question popped up. We've already had clients taken action. They've sent notes to the nonprofits that they serve on. So
Good.
action. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for the time and for joining us. And we'll see you next month for our next subject. Appreciate it. Sue, thank you as always.
Thanks, Diane. Thanks for